Like the fact that you said that feminists have had to try and help putting this in the GDP. Interestingly enough, very traditional old school men understand this. They don't need to be told this. They don't need to be told that the woman brings value. You know what I mean? They're very happy to take you out for a meal. They're very happy to, you have their children. They're very happy to provide for the house and make sure that you are protected and provided for. Like very traditional old school guys are actually probably a little bit of a feminist. You know what I mean? They understand the value that you bring on. It's almost like that middle modern guy where we got caught up, you know, our generation, we're a bit caught up in that of like, yeah, but, you know, can I accept this or can I give this? You know, it's very odd now.
I think it's very confusing, you know, even talking with my brother or with my partner, sometimes feeling I don't want to insult. I don't want to insult a woman by insisting on paying, but I also want to be chivalrous. And what's the right balance to strike?
Welcome back. We are on today with my guest, Hayley McGee, on the Tool for This Shit podcast. I'm your host, Angie Sorensen. If you like the show, please don't forget to give it a 5-star rating and review, and be sure to tell all your friends. Subscribe for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Radio FM, Amazon Music, however you're listening to this podcast right now. The more you do that, the more it helps new listeners discover this show. So I'd really, really appreciate it if you did that. Thank you so much. So in today's episode with the author of The Ex-Boyfriend Yard Sale, Hayley McGee, we discuss if we can put a price on love and if heartbreaks are even worth it in the long run. We go over splitting the bill on dates. And actually, in that passage, I really like to clarify that when we cover that topic, I don't mean dinner with friends, but actual dates and anyone I am romantically involved with. And we also go over whether giving emotional support should have its own price tag in a divorce settlement. So, without further ado, let's begin. Welcome, Hayley.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I am really excited to have you on the podcast because I had the honor to read your book. I got like an advanced copy, and it's now in the store, I think, right? The Ex-Boyfriend Yard Sale.
It's out in the UK, yeah.
It's out in the UK. So I'm really excited to have you on and talk about the cost of love, because I have done some episodes around money in sex and love and whether to split 50-50 and all that kind of stuff. And since then, I have actually changed my mind on quite a few things. And I've done many more episodes around trying to understand relationships and love. But your book also shows the inwards of a relationship, like the things that we do and say when we're caught up in our emotions and our personal triggers. So it's very relatable and a very unapologetically honest memoir, which is called The Ex-Boyfriend Yard Sale. And it really is like, I mean, the way I read it, it's like, your journey, it's on your journey through love and adulthood. And when I say adulthood, I mean like making money.
Yes.
So I will let you describe the book in your own words. So I will stop here. But before we dive in, please introduce yourself, where you live and what you do.
Oh, well, hello. My name is Hayley McGee, and I am a Canadian who lives in London. I've been living here for about 5 years. I started in my professional life as an actor. I'm a trained actor, and I was working in Toronto, and I also quickly became a creator of theater and a writer. And then I started making one-woman shows and performing those, and I made a one-woman show called The Ex-Boyfriend Yard Sale, and then I got a book deal to turn it into a book, and that's going to be kind of the heart, that subject matter will be kind of the heart of what we're talking about today. Mm-hmm. I should maybe also mention that alongside my work as a writer and performer, I do a lot of voiceover work, and I also do a lot of improv comedy. Mm-hmm. Do you want me to talk a little bit about the Ex-Boyfriend Yard Sale itself?
Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah. I just my mind just went into one of the bit in your book. Sorry, then I'll let you talk. But the bit when you do the role play work as well.
Oh yes,
and
I've done some of that.
how funny it is. Like I'm not gonna give any spoiler alerts. I'm gonna let people read it. But there's a lot of very funny bits in your book. And I know you're being really humble. But Hayley is also, she's won some awards. I mean, she's, very well regarded. So I know you're being really humble here. But yeah, please do talk to us about a bit more about the book.
Yes. And of course, as an actor, I've done many, I call them Joe jobs, but pin jobs. They're kind of shitty jobs that you do to float you between gigs. And one of them was doing, you pretend to be a patient for doctors when they're doing their training. So I've done a lot of that. It's called medical role playing.
Yeah.
One of the many side hustles.
Yes.
The ex-boyfriend yard sale, the idea for it came shortly after I'd moved to the UK. I was in credit card debt and I found myself on the phone with Visa promising to pay off my bill by selling some things. And I blurted out, I'm going to have a yard sale. And then I looked around my flat and I realized, oh my God, the only things I could actually sell have all been given to me by different people I've dated over the years. And then first of all, I was like, oh my gosh, that's bizarre. Barring my computer and my phone, I didn't really have anything of value that hadn't been a gift from an ex. And then I went to sort of start pricing these things and put them online. And I started thinking, well, hold on a second. This necklace that I have from the first person I ever had sex with surely is worth more, given the fact that when I went to visit him, I took a bus, and on the bus, someone had wedged a knife between the two seats. And I didn't see the knife until I moved to get comfortable. And the knife sliced through the new jeans I was wearing, through the flesh of my bum, drawing blood. And so I started thinking, well, surely that flesh wound increases the price. And then I thought, but I told him I loved him and I knew I was lying. And so I started trying to figure out how all these anecdotal and sentimental things would affect the price of this necklace. And I got totally overwhelmed by it. But I also became really excited by the idea of a formula that could take into account all the ways we invest or don't into our romantic relationships and spit out an accurate price for the material things we're left with when a romance dies. I call it a formula for the cost of love. So I quickly decided not to sell my objects in a yard sale. And instead, I decided to make a one-woman show about trying to turn sentimental value into cash and trying to put a price tag on failed romance. And that's what the book is about.
Yeah, no, I love this. This is great. I was just thinking, I'm not sure if I saw this in the formula or not, but did you, because there's also like the cost, because time for women and men is slightly different, right? Because we have our eggs and society likes to put a value on us based on, how fresh they are, how many we have left, that kind of stuff. So is there anything about that in the formula?
You know what? I don't think there is in the formula anything about, like a cis woman's time versus a cis man's time.
Yeah.
That is a good point.
Yeah.
Something to bring up with the mathematician for the second edition.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, like absolutely really impressed by all these formulas that she created in the book, The Mathematician, and how you found them. I mean, I definitely recommend people to read it because just the journey, how you went from, like you said, being in debt in a country that you weren't from here, I mean, we're both expats, so I know how it feels like to land somewhere and like trying to understand how everything works, what jobs can I get to actually make proper money, all that kind of stuff. It's all very weird. And so how you turned it around, and we're not going to say how here, but I'm actually really impressed. So that's, honestly, this is really good. And the fact that you've done this through your art and the things that you love doing. And I know it's taken you probably on a road you may not have expected, because you started off as an actress and you did one-woman shows, and you may not have thought that you were going to publish this, this book publishing deal was going to happen. So it kind of is also a bit of a testimony to show that, what that kind of hardship, not that I want to glorify hardship, but how that hardship kind of you raised from the ashes and turned it around, bitches. So, it's really good. Before we carry on, would you be willing to tell us, because obviously it's like, you know, a lot of the things that I talk about is around dating. Would you be happy to tell us, without divulging, you know, what happens at the end of the book, but what your current status is?
Oh, yeah. So I will say this. I fell in love in lockdown. And so I have a new-ish boyfriend. I guess I've been with him for over a year now. And he is originally from Manchester, but he now lives in North London and I live in Southeast London. So he lives in Northeast London. He's up in Walthamstow and I'm down in Southeast London. So we joke that we're in a long distance relationship inside London.
In London, that is long distance relationship. And I used to live in Walthamstow actually when I first landed in the UK. Yeah, so I know how far that is.
Yeah. It's no joke. It's 10 miles, you know.
Yeah. Which in Canada terms is nothing. But
That's
in London
true.
term is huge.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go in, I want to go into like the cost of love, you know, and I know that that's also the name of your podcast, isn't it? The cost of love.
Yes. Yes.
Maybe like to create an image in the listener's mind. I just want to say, when I first got the book, the next thing I did is I actually went on the tube and I was reading the book, and the first few pages, I mean, you really hit the ground running. It was very funny, I kind of related, because I think we've all had those thoughts that you had. There's like, you know, when you work, you're like, well, actually, what could I do? And so I'm going to let people read that. But I was laughing out loud, and there was something I just couldn't help. There was two men sat across of me on the tube, and I couldn't help feel this immense satisfaction in my belly, knowing that they could read the title of the book, which says "The Ex-Boyfriend in the Art Sale," and I kind of felt weirdly empowered and very naughty at the same time, knowing what I was reading. I was like, this was really good. So I think you should almost. I wish I had like a picture of that moment that, you know, I could send you, but it's yeah, it's kind of nice to have. I've had quite a few books I've read over the last few years where the title is really like weird, and I feel really. I just love that when I'm on the tube and I'm like, yes, that's what I'm reading.
That's great.
So now that you've gone through this whole process of, you know, putting a formula to love, and do you feel that it's actually possible to set a price on love? Or relationships, I guess, because that's what we talk about, like relationships. Do you feel is it possible to at all set a price on it?
I think it's such a good question because, you know, I start the book really, really wanting concrete answers. I was in such a place where I felt like a failure as an artist. My career was not where I wanted it to be. My financial situation was absolutely not where I wanted it to be. And I was really struggling in my love life in a kind of on again, off again relationship. And so I kind of like to think about it like this. I'm a very emotional person who, in a moment of desperation, turned to logic for the first time to try to get some hard answers, and numbers are hard answers. And what I now think is you can get a number, but the number's only ever really going to be true in a given moment, because the way that we view our past keeps shifting as we continue living. And so the way we value our past experiences keeps shifting. So I'm sorry, I guess I'm like avoiding your question a little bit, but because yes, you can get a number, but the number is never going to be cemented. It's going to keep changing and shifting.
Yeah, I guess, do you mean, like, I'm having two thoughts when you say that, because it's like, is it, when you say, like, you know, when looking back, you may look or feel differently about, you know, a certain relationship. Do you mean in the sense that you realize how much you've learned from it, and you realize maybe what your role in its demise was and how much you've learned from it? Or is it almost like the second part is also, over time, we forget why we broke up, and you kind of like almost idealize someone from the past that maybe was pretty shitty to you or something like that? Is that?
I guess both can be true. What I was thinking of was, you know, let's say, I'll just tell a real story. So there's someone in my book, and I call all my exes in the book by the name of the item that they gave me. So there's one of my exes who gave me a backpack, and I call him Backpack. And so Backpack, when we broke up, I really felt like I wanted to blame the entire demise of the relationship on him. He kind of stopped being interested in me physically and became really cold and distant at the end of our relationship. And for 5, 6, 7 years after the breakup, I told myself this story that it was his fault. And then as I started thinking about the relationship again when I was working on the show, I started realizing, I was not really in that relationship. I was traveling all the time for work. And I was not really checked in either. And then when I interviewed a whole bunch of my exes for the show and for the book. And then when I interviewed him, he revealed, I won't give this away, but he revealed a whole bunch of stuff about himself and where he was at mentally during the relationship that I had no idea about. And suddenly I understood his behavior in a whole new light. And so it reframes how I view that relationship. And so what I perceived as really negative and kind of like a judgment on my body or like I wasn't attractive anymore or something like that, I realized it had very little to do with me. And so the kind of animosity I felt or blame that I was putting on him has just melted away.
Yes, but that's the bit like about the book, and like you've just mentioned, you interview those exes, and I mean it's like some of those conversations that you report into the book is, I'm like, that must have been quite taxing. I mean, emotionally, like some of it is just, I guess like all of us, when we in the midst of a breakup, we want answers, right? We want to help us getting closure, right? Especially when we're much younger. Whereas like, I guess like now for me, like if that person leaves, that to me, that's closure in itself. Like just the older I get, I'm like, if you don't want to be with me, I'm not interested, right? So it's just like, over time, I guess, so certain things change. Although we still would love to have certain answers, right? Because we only have, like we say, we have the best view of any room because we're not looking at ourselves, right? So it's hard to, so I guess like having those conversations with them, you get to see things differently. Yeah. But I guess like not all of these exes were, I mean, one of those, and I can't remember what his name was called, but he seemed a bit like, he had a little bit of narcissistic qualities, I thought. And his answer about how he should be in the show, I didn't really understand. I didn't get his joke, but I was just like, I think some of them, I can't imagine like, having to contact them and then say, hey, can we have an interview because I'm doing a play? I mean, was it not emotionally taxing, that part?
I think I thought it was really fun initially, and then I would have these conversations, and only after having them, I'd think, oh my gosh, this is, well, one, it's hard because I think I fell a little bit back in love with everybody because you're in this state where you're sort of, I would ask them about the object they gave me and why they gave it to me. And then I would also ask them what they lost and gained by being romantically involved with me, like do a little cost-benefit analysis. And inevitably, they would remember things about the relationship that I had completely forgotten, which is really, really shocking. You think you live with your memory of a person and a memory of a time in your life, and you think that you stop forgetting that there are parts that you've forgotten or blocked out. And so I think the most painful part of those conversations was being reminded of things that sort of brought forward parts of myself or things that I did that I would have rather forgotten. Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And that,
I mean, there are people who also say, like, so I guess the longer, what's the word? I guess like the longer the stretch of time between an event and today, the memory is going to be a bit blurred. And sometimes there's I can't remember where I heard this, but like there's part of our memories, there's quite a big percentage of our memories that are made up in our brain, and we cannot discern the difference. And so it's kind of a little bit, almost like a little bit scary because, it's kind of think, well, what I remember about my life, how much of it is really that accurate,
Yeah.
Because I mean, I can barely remember what I had yesterday for lunch, so never mind going back. I think maybe we remember those things because there is such an emotional imprint on it, right? So when it's quite high emotions, we either go we go into amnesia, or we actually really remember every single details.
Yes.
But most of the relationship is not on such a high, we wouldn't be able to function if it was always such an emotional strain. So based on what you just said now, is there anything that going through this process, going through the process of remembering all these stories, all these relationships, and speaking with those exes and putting a formula onto it, and going through this and seeing the reaction of maybe your publisher and people who read it, is there anything looking back that you would have done differently?
I think so. As I was learning about my different objects and studying them and then working on this formula, I also talked to some economists and I learned about some different economic theories. And one of the economic theories that I learned about is called sunk cost bias. In poker, it's known as being pot committed, but it's essentially this feeling of, I've already invested so much in this thing, I can't stop investing now because I'll lose so much if I stop investing now. But it's this psychological desire to keep investing in a venture that's obviously failing.
Yes.
And so I think the thing that if I could do differently, if I could have a redo, would be to end things earlier, to end things when they were starting to dip, and to not hold on so tightly for fear that, oh gosh, I've already invested so much, and it's so hard to find someone, and dating is exhausting, and I think we can pull this out of the fire. Yeah, that's the one thing.
So can I flip that a little bit for a second?
Yeah.
So obviously I'm just speaking from my own experience, but I feel like sometimes, because that is something that I've noticed in my past, and certain things I could read in your book as well that I could sort of relate to, almost like the common traps of, relationships. And I think sometimes it's not so much a case of ending things sooner. I feel like sometimes the equation is right before or after. So sometimes I feel like I should have taken a bit more of my time before jumping into an exclusive relationship. So where I grew up in Belgium, the phenomenon of dating as we know today, which I guess I've learned from if I first heard about it in, Sex and the City in New York, where multiple dating, right? It's dating more than one person. And I wish I'd known that earlier, because I feel like now when I'm dating, that's exactly what I do. Nothing happens. I'm not kissing the people. I'm not sleeping with them, but I'm letting them whining and dining me, right? Or taking, we go for a walk, right? Especially in lockdown, go for a walk, buy an ice cream, a cup, just taking it easy, getting to know someone. And I find that it sort of takes away that pressure, or that, not so much pressure, but the intensity we put into one person too soon before really understanding. And especially when we start to get physical, something. Sometimes everyone's different, right? I mean, but I think for myself and probably many women, we have this attachment that occurs when we sleep with people, right? So it's an evolution. It makes sense in evolution, right? So if we believe in Darwinism and evolution, it basically makes a lot of sense that we have to attach to one man so he can look after us when we're pregnant, make sure that he slays the lion trying to get into the cave, all that kind of stuff, right? So because we kind of we're not really at the optimal when we're 9 months pregnant. We can't exactly go out there and do 30 shifts a week in a cafe. It's a bit difficult when you're 9 months pregnant, so you need that partnership. So there's a thing of sometimes sometimes the mistakes, if you like, is almost at the beginning. And I have this other belief too, is that unless the person is completely wrong for you, or is completely a psychopath, or, a terrible, abusive person, so, if that person is quite healthy and, and most of the time you kind of get on, I believe that if I look back, anyone I've had a serious relationship with, I believe we could have made it work. But we just did not know how. We lacked the tools. We lacked the understanding. We were either young and silly, or we just didn't understand what was going on. And I think, so that's where I sort of am at now at 42. I mean, and I'll probably change my mind when I'm 50, right? But that's how I see it now. I'm I think everything is recoverable unless there is a really deep mismatch in values. But other than that, I think everything is fixable, because I don't know if that's how you feel, but we kind of almost dating the same person until we learn that bloody lesson.
Well, I think that's right. Until we learn the thing that's tripping us up, we will keep repeating and repeating and repeating the same experiences. I totally agree with that. And I think you make such a good point about jumping in too soon. And so often we're so desperate to find someone,
Yes.
being coupled is so valued in our culture that it's this kind of panic of like, is it you? Is it you? Great, it's you. And you, without knowing the person, you have all these unknowns and you fill them in with things that would really suit you. And then as you get to know them, you're slowly realizing, oh, I made all these assumptions about you
Yes.
based on my own desires and wants that have really nothing to do with who you are. And it's not their fault that they're not the person who you wanted them to be, although sometimes you want to blame them. But I absolutely agree with you taking that time. And, maybe it's not so much that you should end it earlier, but I think there's a lot of ways in which we don't show up 100% in our relationships because we're afraid of being alone. And so maybe it's more, rather than pull the plug, it's more of like, let me lay my cards on the table here. This is what I actually want. This is what I'm actually interested in. Can you meet me halfway on this? And daring to have those conversations earlier rather than putting them off and putting them off and putting them off and sort of like closing your eyes and just hoping it gets better.
Yes.
That's something I think I would do differently.
No, I agree. And I think it's one of those things that, doing that can either go completely wrong or go completely well. And wrong, just it ending does not mean it's wrong. I think it's like I think if we come from a place like you were saying earlier, that being coupled up is so valued in society, but if you come from a place of like, I'm okay, like, it's almost like understanding that solo is great, like if you can make it solo, but also understanding that just because you are solo does not mean that someone else isn't going to value you and and love you, and you're gonna love them. So I think it's coming from this place of not being so like that fear, basically, right? So it's that fear of if not him, and overly compromising, and I think we've all heard and probably said ourselves things that we're probably cringing on today, going, oh my God, I can't believe, what was I putting up with, or what is my friend doing? Like it's easier to hear it when it's other people, right? Like it's
it's so much easier when it's other people because you don't, you have all your own quirks and compulsions when it's you. And when your friend is just, I always say, like, I didn't make this up, but I like this saying, you don't go to the hardware store if you want a pint of milk. And sometimes it seems like that when someone's dating someone who just can't give them what they want. Yeah. And it's so much easier to see it in a friend than in yourself. And you're like, but maybe this time the hardware store will have milk. Maybe they'll have it in the back room. Maybe someone will have brought it for their lunch. Yeah. And
no, it's true. Like it's understanding where people are at, and sometimes, like you said, like I think, like like the walking away at some point is important. Sometimes there's only so much talking you can do, and walking away, that person can also reassess, and they may want to actually supply milk in their hardware store. You know what I mean? It's like, but you can't force them. It's like going to McDonald's and expecting to get a healthy meal. It's just not going to happen. So with all that process that you've done and all that you've learned, I'm just wondering. And this is probably quite inflammatory depending who's listening, but like are divorce settlements making sense to you, or like how do you feel now about divorce settlements now that you've wrote the play and the book?
It's so interesting because I've never been married, so I don't know the experience, what it is to really blend finances with someone and then really have to pick them apart. But I've had a few friends who've gone through divorces, and I also talked to a couple divorce lawyers when I was working on the book, because divorce lawyers actually deal with this question around how do we divide shared assets, and oftentimes given sort of emotional, potential emotional injuries that may have taken place. And so It does make sense to me that you would need some help
Yes.
arbitrating that because emotions are running so high. And without it, I know, there's two people in my life who left their marriages saying, I don't want anything. They were in such a state of high emotion. They just said, you keep everything, the house, the car, you take it all.
Was that a woman or a man?
Both men.
Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And at least one years later said, I really regret doing that. But I was in such a high state of emotion and I couldn't process it. I just thought, I'm walking away and I'm walking away from everything and I'm going to rebuild everything. And having a lawyer saying, okay, let's just divide things equitably. Let's look at all of the things all the money that you each brought in, all the assets gained that you each brought in during the marriage, that's the marital property. And we're going to divide this up. Even Steven would have just been so useful in the subsequent years when you're not feeling that level of emotion and you're thinking like, yeah, I could really use that couple hundred grand that I would have got out of the sale of the house.
But it's interesting because I was, brought up to become very independent. I grew up with a single mom.
Yeah.
I used to be very much like, I don't owe anything to any man. I was always the first one to like split that bill, all of that stuff. And, since then I've sort of understood where it came from and I sort of like changed my mind on all of those things. But one of the things I used to be very judgy about, so, I had some friends, female friends, who married well, and I didn't understand why they were being so adamant that they were doing the man a favor by not taking 50% of the assets. He came in with more money than she had, and he supported her, and she was working as well.
Yeah.
But financial, he was the one really the main provider, if you like.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand. She was like, because she wanted to divorce quickly, which I can understand. Divorce is obviously is an awful thing to go through. And she was like, I'm only taking 25%, but she seemed to be so. It was the ungrateful bit that I didn't really like. But in terms of the math itself, I didn't understand it. And then it wasn't until like I spoke with a few guests on the show that I was like, oh, wait a minute. I have actually only been putting value. And this is where I think your formula comes in. Mm-hmm. I was only putting value on hard cash, if you like.
Yeah.
Like the only value you don't, but unconsciously, but actually in a relationship, we bring in more than sex and cash.
Yeah.
Right. So it's the emotional support. Is the I have an ex. He was married 20 years, and one of the things that put me off was that he kept he was definitely, he'd been very stung by the fact that she kept the house and he had to give an allowance. They have 2 children, and something bothered me that he was so weird about it was that she was obviously a stay-at-home mom, but the fact that he could actually build a successful business was because she stayed at home with the kids. The reason why he could have the kids was because she decided to stay at home with it. That's a decision they made together. So she stayed at home. She sacrificed, her getting back in the job market. She's almost unemployable. She had to actually start her own little freelance business, right? But it's like, I'm like, she gave you life, 2 children. Yeah. And the fact that you're out there, and he didn't understand why she wanted half of the business. And I was just thinking, actually, half of the business is hers because all the meals, all the times that she had to come to business networking event with you, making you look good, because actually that's what almost, our partners make ourselves, if you go to a party, like a birthday party with your boyfriend, and if he behaves like a shithead, it's embarrassing. But if he actually is nice to everyone and is open and is easy to talk to and your friends like him, it's really nice. And then when you take him to work event, he's not embarrassing you. I mean, there's a value to that. I know it sounds really, I guess, odd to say that, but all those things are value adds, right? And your formula really goes into, those things, like how much of it you gained, emotionally, what are the, all those different costs of love, all these different variables. Yeah. And I know divorce settlement may be a little bit different, but something that I used to really look down on and hated, and I was just like, if I was to ever get married, I want nothing. I realized actually is almost like diminishing what a woman is actually bringing to the table.
Yes.
And the reverse would be true. If you were the main breadwinner and the guy was there at home bringing up the children, and you were out there touring the world, for example, right? He's helped you having, you know, the fact that you don't have to be home all day long with the kids and you can go out on tour, right? That's a value add. And he can't do that and earn cash at the same time.
Absolutely. And this is something that I learned about when doing research for the book. Feminists have been trying to get care included in the GDP for decades because there's all this free labor that majoritively,
exactly.
Yeah, majoritively women are doing, whether that's taking care of the elderly or taking care of children. Yeah. And that's not considered, it's not considered economically, but of course it adds huge value. So yeah, I completely agree with you. And I also know the feeling of like, no, I make my own money and I take my own money. I think, of course, especially with children, it's such a joint venture. And depending how you divide that up, I can really see, you know, that you'd want that at that point, you're really in a kind of divide and conquer situation. Most couples are. And so, if the marriage breaks up, you kind of got to split things 50-50.
Yeah. And you know, it's interesting you mentioned the feminist because it's almost like now we live in, there's almost like two extremes, right? It's like we feel like almost like, you know, obviously the feminists have had to, obviously I wasn't aware of that because I don't really follow that stuff. But like the fact that you said that feminists have had to try and help putting this in the GDP, interestingly enough, very traditional old school men understand this. They don't need to be told this. They don't need to be told that the woman brings value. You know what I mean? They're very happy to take you out for a meal. They're very happy to, you have their children. They're very happy to provide for the house and make sure that you are protected and provided for. Like very traditional old school guys are actually probably a little bit of a feminist. You know what I mean? They understand the value that you bring on. It's almost like that middle modern guy where we got caught up, you know, our generation, we're a bit caught up in that of like, yeah, but, you know, can I accept this or can I give this? You know, it's very odd now.
I think it's very confusing, you know, even talking with my brother or with my partner, sometimes feeling I don't want to insult. I don't want to insult a woman by insisting on paying, but I also want to be chivalrous. And what's the right balance to strike?
But that's the problem, isn't it? It's like when feminism goes too far or when a movement goes too far or doesn't explain the discernment. I think, I mean, I wouldn't want to be a guy taking a woman out because I know, among my friends, a lot of us, we think quite differently. Some of my female friends would be outraged, you know, not to pay half on every single meal. Whereas for me, it's weird. There's something about the meal. It's not about the holidays. It's like, but the meal, I feel really weird paying for a meal for a man. You know, I have done it. I've taken my ex to the restaurant. I remember I felt really weird after, but he loved it. And I thought there's something not quite right. It's something about the meal. It's a very primitive thing, you know, like I love giving gifts, but for some reason, so it's not about the money. It's about the fact that I had to pay for his plate. It's very strange for me. There's something really weird that happens inside of me. I just don't like it. I really don't like it.
That's very interesting. Yes, I understand. You know, I understand the feeling of you invited me, so I think, you know, you should be treating me. I know that feeling, but I don't. But I've definitely enjoyed paying for other people's meals. I think it is interesting that we need to split things 50-50, and I write about this in my book. Because the gender pay gap still exists.
Yes, exactly.
It's worth thinking about, like, should we be splitting things 50-50 or should we be splitting things proportionally? So if you earn 70% of the money for the couple and your partner earns 30%, should you be splitting everything 70-30 to make it kind of even, to make it actually even?
Yeah, I mean, I've taken friends out to dinner. It's not so much about that. It's like a person who I'm romantic with.
Yeah.
A man. There's something that's weird, and I guess that's maybe also like where I grew up in Belgium. If you ever offered to pay for a meal, it was like castrating them.
Right.
It's insulting. Like my generation, obviously,
Yeah,
now,
yeah.
now the young and the modern ones may be different. But I remember even among friends, like male friends, like platonic, it was just very odd. They was just like, what are you doing?
Right.
And then, but then it was only until like I became an adult and was out in the world, I was like, no, I'm splitting everything 50-50. I don't want him to think that, oh. And then now I'm like back to like, kind of like a bit more relaxed about it. But
Yeah.
it changes all the time, and there is no set answer. Sometimes it feels,
No, and it changes with our thinking about it too, doesn't it? And our understanding. It makes sense it makes sense that it would be very empowering to suddenly go, no, 50-50. I want to pay the half and be treated equally. And then for that to become more nuanced, I think it is a natural progression. Yeah.
But for that to almost be even, I'd have to just rock up the way I came out of bed. You know what I mean? I would have to, I haven't done my hair. They show up and they've just showered, hopefully. They've shaved, put some moisturizer on, and that's it. They don't have to, there's none of all that upkeep situation going on.
Well, there's a lot of pressure on women to look a certain way. Yeah. And of course, there's the pink tax, which is that products for women, razors for women are typically more expensive than razors for men, even though they're the exact same blades. Yeah. They get marked up, and that this happens on a lot of products that both men and women use. So, yeah.
There is all of that. So, so I guess something else I wanted to ask you is, would you say that all of these experiences we go through in romantic love, and especially like heartbreaks and disappointments in our 20s and 30s, are they worth it? Based on your book now.
Well, I think they are, and I say that with the caveat of barring serious physical, emotional abuse. I really think they are the kind of standard, like garden variety heartbreak, even being cheated on, betrayals. I think all of that stuff is really, it's so annoying to say, but it's character making. It makes your life rich. It builds your empathy. You have experiences that make you see the world in a new way. If you've never had your heart broken, it's really hard to have real empathy for people who are going through heartbreak. And so I do think they're incredibly valuable, and they're often teaching you what you don't want. And that's really, really good to know. It doesn't mean it's fun, but I do think they all have immense value. And yeah.
Yeah, and I so because when I was reading your book, I think all of us, we can relate to, struggle in relationships. And, there was, especially towards the end, I was like, oh my God. I was just like, no, Haley, no, don't go there. No, Haley,
making such bad decisions.
Yeah, kick him to the curb. But it's so hard when we, like I said, we know emotions or triggers, it's really hard to see. I find it really difficult sometimes to see the wood from the trees. Yeah. Or the trees from the wood. I don't know which way it goes.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
It's really difficult. And so, in terms of the reactions to your book, is there one particular ex that you had the most either reactions for or mansplaining on? Did any guys come on explain to you? Is there anyone that sort of created the most outraged, or any of them?
Well, the guy who I call typewriters, I mean, he's very funny, and he has an incredible sense of humor, so he's also kind of making fun of himself. But when I interviewed him originally for the stage show, he was really vying to be in the show and telling me that a one-woman show about ex-boyfriends at the Fringe was basically just such a cheap idea. And, if he had $1 for every show about ex-boyfriends at the Fringe, he'd be a rich man. So he kind of gave me the most flack about it. But in a way that was very funny and that I use in the show and also in the book. So I think he's the one who had the most to say about it. Oh, and then I include in the book one of the exes who I didn't interview, who I call Jewelry Box, heard that I was making this show and sent me a cease and desist letter saying I want to make sure none of the details of our relationship end up in this piece. And they're all wildly disguised. No one would know that it's him. But I sort of rewrote the letter and included it because I thought it's interesting to see someone contend with being included in someone else's piece of art. And and it is a questionable thing to do. And one of my goals with the book was to, yes, be honest and in a certain way be hard on my exes, but I wanted to be the most hard on myself. And so it felt really important to include that point of view, to say, like, look, you're objectifying your past experiences and trying to make money off it. And that is a little salacious. Yeah, I just thought it was an important thing, an important criticism to not shy away from.
Yeah, but I think at the same time, I mean, two things. One is I love that you included his reaction, like, you know, his cease and desist, because it's like a gift that keeps on giving. It's like, okay, well, now I'm going to include that in, you know, it's like, don't give people ammunition, you know, they're just gonna. But well, I guess three things. It's like, so there is that, and two is like, you change details so that no one can know really who. You know, you've changed enough details, so there is. You know, you were decent in that vein. And again, I don't know any of them. Maybe I would know who it is if I knew them. I don't know. But like you said, you've changed enough details for them to be, and changed certain things, you know, around it so that we can really add up who is who. And that's, you know, that's a very decent thing to do. And it doesn't take away from the purpose of the book. And what was the third thing? Because you mentioned about Susan Desist. Yeah, but you said like it was delicious. But the thing is that you, in the whole book, you know, which is I think probably why I made a point at the beginning to say like it's very like unapologetically honest. And what I mean by that is that many of the things you could have really skipped over and not mentioned about your reactions, your behavior, right? So you're not out here saying, and I was so amazing, and you know, I did all of this, and you know, I was an absolute, you know, gift to the earth, to them, you know. You're okay to show not really likable moments about yourself. And the thing is, most of us have been there. It's very easy to say, oh, I can't believe she, you know, said this or reacted this way. Well, guess what? She's human. Like, we've all done shit. Like, you know, we all have. And I think that's where it's actually, I think that's how you can actually get away with actually telling stories like this, is actually showing also your own, sometimes you are a little bit the bottom of not the bottom of the joke, 'cause it's not a joke, but you know, you're happy to be showing that side of yourself, and that's where honesty comes in.
I think it's so important. I don't know if you know the writer David Sedaris. He wrote this. He writes these amazing short stories, a lot of times based on his own life, and he has one of those master classes, you know, the master class thing that you can buy the membership to. And I really like his writing, and I took his master class, and he talks about writing and writing about your own life. And he was saying, you know, if you're writing about your own life, especially in comedy, you have to be the hardest on yourself. And he says, like, you cannot control what people are going to think about you. Like, writing only gives you the illusion of control. So let go of it and show the world that you are fallible. And don't try to explain why you did some horrible thing. Like, people are going to judge you no matter how much you try to explain it or not. So just go for it. And I found that such good advice, and I really tried to take it in the book.
It is crucial advice. It is so true, because I mean, I'm experienced that with podcasting, where I can't actually control how people are receiving what I'm saying. And sometimes the way what I say would then land in someone, and they'll churn it in somehow and come up with something completely different, and I'm like, that is not it's nowhere near. I don't even know what, and it's like, and sometimes, you know, you can, and I don't know if it's something that you've experienced, obviously you know, you're very open in your book, but you know, I guess like the more I do this, the more I kind of sometimes get a bit of exposed of odd reactions or creeps and stuff, and so it's like, is understanding that. So like he says, there's nothing you can do. There's nothing I can't go out and control.
Yeah.
And also part of a lot of the things that I've said in the past, I wouldn't say them today. Yeah. But I'm happy to leave it because I think it also is part of what makes you human. You're going to say or think or feel certain things about certain things until you change your mind. And some things you don't change your mind on. Some things will stay at your core for a very long time. But it's like, it really is, you cannot, you cannot control outcome as much as I would love to.
I know, me too.
I really want to.
Me too.
So you mentioned something in your book about family, and I really felt that because I mean, I don't know if I can ask you how old you are.
Oh yeah, I'm 35.
35, okay, yeah, and I'm 42, and I feel like that we said that thing about family and in your book, and I really felt that, and you didn't necessarily mention children. You just said it's about having someone who becomes family, right? If I remember this correctly, but it's having that person, and I feel like I wanted to ask you because we both, expats or migrants or whatever the word is nowadays, I don't know, but we both live in a country that's not where we're from or where our family is, and that feeling of home and that concept of dating and building something with someone, is that something that because that's something I speak with my therapist about.
Oh yeah.
But is that how do you come to terms, or what are your feelings and thoughts around being in a different country? And obviously you're dating someone, I can understand, is from here or grew up here, so how do you fix, obviously Canada is not next door. So is this something that you're thinking about, like where in the future you'll be? How do you convey that with dating? That question, sorry, that's very convoluted, but I guess what I'm trying to ask you is that how do you feel about dating in a foreign country with people from that country, where unless you've already made your mind you're going to stay here, or have you made your mind you're going to go back to Canada? Like, is there a conflict around this, in a conflict?
No. So
Oh, wow. Okay, I need to learn from you because I'm always in a conflict.
Well, I feel I really wanted to come to the UK when I came, and I'm on an artist visa now, so it's good for 5 years, and it's a visa that could move me towards citizenship. So in my brain, I'd lived in Toronto for 12 years when I moved here, and it felt like, and I think, that's part of the book too, I felt like, no, I can't go back. I can't go back. I've moved. I can't go back. And so there has been a real effort to try to start putting down roots here. And so I don't have any pressure to go back to Canada. Of course, I really miss my friends. Now I'm in long distance relationships with most of my friends. And I'm, of course, in a long distance relationship with my family, and I miss them. But I really feel at home in London. And I say in London because I feel that I moved to the city-state of London. I don't necessarily feel like I moved to England. I don't know if you resonate with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
London's such an international city. It's such the epicenter for so many different industries where people are doing work at the top of their game in so many different fields. It's such an exciting place to be. So I really feel good in London. And then when I think about ever living in Canada again, it's just something that I'm like, I'm not going to say I'm never going to do it. I'm going to remain open to it. And I have a little fantasy of one day opening some kind of arts center or having some kind of like property in a really remote area that I could visit and that I could lend to friends and fellow artists to go and just be in nature and make work. And then maybe when I'm really old, maybe, my partner and I will retire to some like very remote place in Canada. But yeah, I'm not really too attached to, I don't feel really attached to going back. I feel more committed to really establishing myself here. So
How long have you been here now in London?
I've been here for 5 years.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so you definitely don't have that conflict.
I'm so sorry.
No,
I'm so
that's
sorry.
good. No, I'm glad. It means that, it goes to show like it's very much how we perceive things, and worrying too far in the future is no good. So Hayley, we're going to go into the finishing thoughts, which are the 2 questions I ask every single one of my guests.
Yeah.
But just before we go there, I just really want to say, like, a really big thank you for coming on the show. And, it's been, I think, honestly, like, I'm going to let the people read it. I don't want to give, like, spoiler alerts, because it's also just brand new. It's not like if your book had been around for a few years, I would have totally been doing spoiler alerts. But it hasn't, so I want to give people a chance. But it's like, you have really turned shit around, financially a little bit. Like, I'm really proud of you. And I feel I can say that because I'm older, so I hope it doesn't come across like matronizing. But it's just like, honestly, you should be proud of yourself, especially in the country you landed in, basically, and you turned it around. And so it has a lot to say and to show for yourself. So I think it's brilliant. So okay, so I'm just going to ask you the finishing thoughts. And the first one is, what do you wish you'd realized at 18?
Oh, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I think you ask such great questions. And it's been so nice to speak with you. I really, really appreciate it. And I'll take any of the pride and feelings of pride in me that I can get. So and I've never heard someone say matronizing. I think that's such a great phrase instead of patronizing. It's perfect. But I didn't experience it that way at all. It just makes me feel good. What do I wish I'd realized when I was 18? I wish that when I was 18 and just starting to go to drama school, or actually I went when I was 17. So I wish when I was 17, 18, that I had a more skeptical approach towards authority. I wish that I had some healthy questioning in me. I so badly wanted to be a good student and get things right and really put my trust and belief in people simply because they were older than I was. And I think my life would have been more fun and I would have felt better if I just had some healthy skepticism around teachers and authority figures.
Yeah, I think it's always healthy to have a society that asks questions. I think it's really good to question authority. And it's not to be, what's the word? Contradictory. I can't pronounce it. Contradictorian? How do you pronounce it?
Yeah, contradictory.
Thank you. That word. But it's like, it's in the same vein. And I feel about that across the board, like when I've had students or participants in workshops. And so like, I just like people, they have to even question me. And I think that's why it's healthy. It's good that we can have demonstration, protests, or people who go on strike. As much as it can be annoying, depending on which side of the fence you are, it means that we're not in a dictatorship.
Yeah, exactly.
So just be grateful that people are out blocking traffic or whatever is going on, I think is good. And it starts from there. It starts from questioning, teachers too, that understanding they're not gods, they don't know everything.
Yeah, they're just flawed human beings doing their best, just like you. Yeah.
And thank God they're flawed. No one wants to be around a perfect person. It'd be really boring.
No.
Yeah. So, and then the second thought is, what stuff do you not put up with anymore?
Well, this question makes me think of something. It's a little bit of a sideways answer to this question, but something I don't put up with anymore is letting people ruin a day that I'm having. And by that, I mean, when I was younger, I could have a kind of negative interaction with someone who was working in a shop or a barista. They'd be in a bad mood or something. And I would have this kind of like horrible experience with them and it would ruin my day. And this is probably thank you to therapy. But now I really see, like, if someone is unkind to me, especially if there's someone I don't know, I know enough now to say that has nothing to do with me and I'm not gonna let it in and I'm not gonna take it on. And so, yeah, just like really responding to the horrible moods and the ill treatment from strangers is something I don't put up with anymore. And it's made things so much more enjoyable.
Yeah, because otherwise we're just riding this roller coaster of drama.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
you know, it's almost like, you know, what's the price of your happiness?
Yeah.
And if it means like, and we've, you know, and I've been there too, where sometimes like one interaction, I'm like, oh my God, you know, and it's like ruined it for a few hours. But then it's almost like realizing, wait, so let's say if it was like with, you mentioned like, you know, let's say customer service or barista, whatever it is, like say you got like your coffee was really bad or they were just really rude to you or something.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, is my price of happiness like £2.50, like the price of a latte in London? Or
Yeah.
like, is that it? Is that how much like I'm willing to sell it for and then becoming miserable, right? It's like,
Yes.
and all of a sudden when you transform it that way, you go, oh, wait, hang on. No, my happiness is worth a lot more than just this one interaction with a stranger. No, it's not happening. Not happening. So Hayley, where can people find you? Where can they find the book? How can they work with you? Because I know you do like workshops as well. Like, give us all the goodies.
Okay, so my book is called The Ex-Boyfriend Yard Sale. You can buy it in the UK wherever you get your books, but I'd highly recommend going into your local bookshop and getting them to order it if they don't have it. That's like the best way to support any author whose work you're interested in reading, but you can also get it online wherever you like. It'll be out in North America in early 2022. I have a podcast called The Cost of Love where I talk about the idea of the cost of love with experts in related fields. So I talk to a couples therapist, an AI specialist, all different kinds of brainiacs, and we delve into the conversations around love and money, relationships, and numbers. I teach a whole bunch of online courses. I teach artists how to make their own solo shows, how to self-produce their own work. And I'm also about to launch a voiceover starter kit. So it'll be an online course that helps actors, comedians, and people with great voices set up their home studio, make a voice demo, and start working in that industry. And you can find out all about my courses and those offerings on my website, which is HayleyMcGee.ca.
Perfect. And, you know, I just want to just point out, your book is actually published. Like, it's it's not a self-published. It's actually published by a publishing house. Can you pronounce the name? I can't pronounce the name.
Yes. In the UK, it's published by Hodder and Stoughton.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So, kudos to you. So, and actually, if you were ever to, if I could put like if there was a request box, not that you've opened up that bit, but if I was to give you an unsolicited request, like I'd love to hear like, where are they now? But not actually the exes, but the friends in your book. Because reading it, I kind of grew attached to them. I don't know how other people have. I don't know what the feedback has been, but especially Fee and Ollie and all these people, like it's just like where are they now would be so funny. Like in a few years or whatever. Like what's happening, what's the outcome, especially with Fee. So anyways, that was just a little thing.
Oh, that's a great idea. I'm going to squirrel that away.
Yeah. So I just want to say thank you so much, Hayley, for coming on and being game and being willing to talk about this. So thank you so much. And I look forward to see what's next for you.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Bye.
Bye.
And that's our episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Please don't forget to rate, review, share it, subscribe it on iTunes, follow it on Spotify or whichever platform you listen from. However you show love is how you can support this show. Drop me your questions or suggestions for future episodes via the website at angie-ness.com or come and find me on Instagram at @toolfordishitpodcast. See you next week, and until then,
Use an elf inappropriately.